The year was 2050. For most people, it started just like any other year. There were resolutions, celebrations, and the usual bustle of life. Technology had progressed rapidly in the last few decades. The cities were more connected, cars hovered, and artificial intelligence played a significant role in daily routines. But beneath the surface of this advanced world, there was an undercurrent of tension. Climate change was worsening, countries were at odds over resources, and the divide between the rich and the poor had grown wider. Humanity was racing towards an uncertain future. And then, it happened. It was a crisp spring morning when the first reports came in. People living in different corners of the world saw strange lights in the sky. They weren't shooting stars or weather phenomena. These lights were different. They moved in perfect synchronization, weaving intricate patterns that defied logic. They appeared above cities, towns, and rural landscapes alike, creating a global spectacle that no one could ignore. Within hours, social media was flooded with videos, photos, and frantic discussions. News anchors scrambled to cover the event, switching between live feeds from different parts of the world. The phrase, "Are we alone?" filled every broadcast. The next few days were filled with theories. Scientists, amateur astronomers, and self-proclaimed experts all shared their opinions. Some thought it was a rare natural occurrence, a bizarre dance of light caused by some atmospheric phenomenon. Others were sure it was human-made, a result of a new weapon or drone technology developed in secret. But deep down, most people had the same thought: extraterrestrials. The notion wasn't new. UFO sightings and alien theories had been around for centuries. But this time felt different. This time, there was no ambiguity. The lights in the sky moved with intelligence. On the fifth day, something changed. The lights, which had remained silent until then, began to shift. The patterns they formed grew more complex, almost as if they were sending a message. A renowned linguist, Drive, Eleanor Gray, was among the first to voice her theory: the lights were communicating. Teams of experts worked around the clock, trying to decode the shifting shapes and sequences. Their efforts seemed fruitless until the seventh day. That night, as people watched from their balconies and streets, the lights suddenly merged into a single, blinding beam and descended towards Earth. The beam touched down in the deserts of Nevada, right near the old, infamous Area 51. It was as if they chose a place already wrapped in human myth and speculation, a place known for its alien lore. News helicopters swarmed the area, their cameras capturing the scene from above. What they saw left them speechless. The beam slowly faded, revealing a massive structure, metallic and glistening under the sunlight. It looked like a ship, but unlike anything ever seen before. It was sleek, without seams, and emitted a low hum that resonated in the chest of anyone nearby. The world watched in stunned silence as the doors of the craft opened, and they emerged. The aliens were tall, standing nearly 7 feet, with long, lean limbs and pale, silver skin that shimmered with an otherworldly glow. Their eyes were large and entirely white, exuding both wisdom and something deeper, something that humans couldn't quite name. They wore simple robes that draped around their bodies, and when they moved, it was with an elegance that seemed almost hypnotic. The news feeds buzzed with words like otherworldly, celestial, and majestic. Then, one of them stepped forward, breaking the line of silent figures. The air seemed to shift as he raised a hand and, without speaking, conveyed a message that resonated across every electronic device on the planet. From smartphones to billboards, the message was heard in perfect clarity. His voice was deep, almost musical, and each word carried weight. "We are the Romulus. We come not to conquer but to guide. Your world is on the brink of a transformation that you cannot complete alone. We are here to help you take the next step." The words sent a wave of shock across the globe. It was as if time stood still. Families sat together in their living rooms, their eyes glued to the screens, hearts pounding. The reactions were varied. Some gasped in awe, unable to believe what they were hearing. Others were filled with fear, their thoughts racing with questions about what this arrival truly meant. Were the Romulus saviors or harbingers of doom? World leaders scrambled to respond. Emergency meetings were called. Military forces stood at high alert, and scientists tried to understand everything they could about the Romulus. Yet, the aliens did not move, nor did they show any aggression. They simply stood there, a living mystery that invited both hope and dread. The following day, a global broadcast was organized. Leaders from major nations came together, some reluctantly, to address the world. The President of the United States, flanked by representatives from Europe, Asia, and other continents, took a deep breath before speaking into the camera. Today, we stand at the crossroads of human history. The Romulus have made themselves known and offered their assistance. We must approach this with caution but also with the courage to face the unknown. Together, we will seek to understand their intentions. But while officials tried to maintain a composed front, the streets told a different story. Protests erupted, driven by those who feared the unknown and believed humanity should handle its own problems. Meanwhile, groups that had long believed in extraterrestrial life celebrated in the streets, waving banners that read, "Welcome, Romulus." And, "The future is here." The divide between fear and hope grew wider with each passing hour. Back in Nevada, the Romulus remained outside their ship, unmoving, as if waiting for humanity to decide its next move. It was then that Thales, their apparent leader, stepped forward once more. He looked out over the assembled crowd of military personnel, scientists, and journalists and spoke again. This time, his voice resonated not just through devices but in the minds of everyone present. "Your world is at a turning point. We are here to show you the way forward, but only if you are ready to listen and learn." The words echoed in the silence that followed. It wasn't just a statement, it was a challenge. The arrival of the Romulus had begun a chapter in human history that no one had anticipated, a story where every decision could change the fate of humanity. The days following the arrival of the Romulus were a blur of activity and anticipation. Their ship stood as an unyielding monument in the Nevada desert, casting a long shadow over the crowds that gathered at its perimeter. Governments around the world struggled to decide on a unified approach. Should they reach out, stay defensive, or let the aliens make the next move? The decision was made for them when, without warning, all communication devices worldwide crackled to life. The voice of Thales resonated with a calm authority that silenced millions in an instant. "We come in peace," he began. "We have watched over your planet for centuries, observing your growth, your struggles, and your triumphs. Now, as you stand on the brink of self-destruction, we offer our knowledge. But know this, we come not as saviors, but as guides." Thales' words were spoken in every language known to humanity, flawlessly adapted to each culture's vernacular. The announcement was met with astonishment and skepticism. In living rooms and public squares, people debated the sincerity of the Romulus. Were they truly here to help, or was this just a prelude to conquest? The United Earth Council, formed hastily to manage the unprecedented situation, decided to approach with caution. Dr. Eleanor Gray, the linguist who had first identified the Romulus, light-based communications, was chosen as humanity's representative for the initial contact. A convoy of military vehicles, scientists, and media personnel escorted her to the ship. The desert air was thick with tension. The Romulus, standing in perfect formation outside their craft, looked both intimidating and graceful, like sentinels carved from light. Dr. Gray, a woman known for her composed demeanor, felt her pulse race as she stepped forward. Thales, taller than the others and possessing an aura of quiet power, met her gaze. His eyes, endless pools of white, studied her without emotion. For a moment, there was only silence, the kind that seems to stretch on forever. Then, Thales spoke, not through a device, but directly into her mind. "Dr. Gray, we are pleased that you have chosen dialogue over confrontation. You have questions, as do your people. We will answer." The crowd, though kept at a distance, held its collective breath as Dr. Gray gathered her thoughts. Her voice was clear but tinged with the weight of representing an entire planet. "Why now? Why come at this moment when we are at our most vulnerable?" Thales' expression shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if to acknowledge the gravity of her question. "For millennia, we have observed your kind rise and fall, create and destroy. You are a species of boundless potential, but your conflicts, your divisions, threaten to unravel all you have built. We come now because you stand at the edge of change. Without guidance, your civilization will not survive the century." His words reverberated across the landscape, carried through live broadcasts to billions of homes. People whispered, nodded, or shook their heads in disbelief. Could it be true? Were humans on the verge of collapse, needing external intervention to avoid catastrophe? The Romulus, with their silver skin shimmering under the desert sun, seemed as much part of the mystery as the answers they held. Dr. Gray pushed further. If you wish to guide us, what do you ask in return? No gift is ever truly free. This time, Thelow's gaze seemed to soften, if only a fraction. You were perceptive, Drive. Gray. No, we do not seek dominion or tribute. What we ask for is unity. Your species is fragmented by borders, politics, and ideologies. To move forward, you must come together as one. Only then can you grasp what we offer, knowledge that will heal your planet and propel you into a future free from the shadows of your past. The implications of this demand rippled through the crowd. Unity. The very idea seemed impossible, a utopian dream in a world so fractured. World leaders, watching from their capitals, shared knowing looks, each calculating what unity would mean for their power, their people, their way of life. As the day turned to evening, Drive. Gray and Thelows continued their conversation, while journalists pieced together stories for their anxious audiences. The debate raged on every corner of the globe. Was unity worth the price? What did true unity even look like? In some places, hope sparked, community groups formed, calling for cooperation and open-mindedness. In others, fear spread like wildfire, fueling protests and violence as people clung to the identities and beliefs they had known their whole lives. Thelows, sensing the turmoil that followed his words, offered one more statement before retreating into his ship. We will return tomorrow. Until then, think deeply on what you value most, the divisions that define you, or the potential that awaits if you come together. As the Romulus stepped back into their ship, the hum of their vessel echoed, a gentle reminder of their presence. The ship's exterior, once glistening, now shimmered dimly as if fading into the backdrop of the night. The crowd dispersed slowly, voices hushed, some casting anxious glances at the stars. That night, the world didn't sleep. From bustling cities to the quietest villages, conversations unfolded. Children asked their parents if the Romulus were gods. Elders recounted old tales of visitors from the sky, stories passed down generations that now felt more real than ever. Scientists pored over data, analyzing the energy signature of the ship and any trace they could find to understand the technology that defied their knowledge. Politicians argued over strategies, weighing the benefits of collaboration against the risks of being seen as weak. Dr. Gray returned to her quarters, mind racing. The eyes of the world were on her, but more than that, the future rested on what came next. She knew that tomorrow's meeting would be even more critical. What questions should she ask? What answers could shift the balance of fear and hope? And as the moon cast its light over the alien craft standing still in the desert, a quiet understanding settled over humanity. The first contact with the Romulus was not just the start of a conversation. It was the beginning of a choice that would shape the destiny of every person on Earth. The following morning, the world braced itself for the return of the Romulus. News channels broadcasted images of the Nevada desert, now a focal point for humanity's future. Drones captured aerial views of the sleek, silver ship that had become a symbol of both hope and uncertainty. The early light of dawn cast a golden glow over the scene, highlighting the tense faces of those gathered. Dr. Eleanor Gray stood at the forefront, feeling the weight of billions of lives on her shoulders. As promised, the Romulus emerged from their vessel just as the sun broke over the horizon. Thelows led the group, his white eyes scanning the crowd before resting on Dr. Gray. The murmurs of anticipation quieted, replaced by a silence so deep it was almost tangible. Thelows raised a hand and spoke, his voice as resonant as ever. We are ready to share our knowledge, but only under conditions that ensure your survival and growth. His words carried across the landscape and into every home watching the broadcast. The first condition is unity. You must form a global council that represents all people, not just a handful of leaders. Decisions must be made for the good of humanity as a whole, not individual nations. Dr. Gray nodded, taking in the gravity of his words. And if we do not agree to this condition? She asked, her voice steady but filled with concern. Thelows' expression remained unreadable. If unity is not achieved, the knowledge we offer will remain locked. Your world will continue on its current path, facing challenges that will grow insurmountable without cooperation. We cannot force unity upon you. This must be your choice. The message was clear. The fate of the world now hinged on whether people could put aside their differences. The reaction was immediate. Within hours of Thoreau's statement, debates erupted across the globe. Politicians, journalists, and everyday citizens weighed in. Some argued that uniting under a single council would be impossible, a naive dream that ignored centuries of conflict and cultural diversity. Others believed it was the only way forward, a chance to end wars and divisions that had plagued humanity for so long. In the midst of this chaos, the United Earth Council began to take form. World leaders, under immense pressure from their citizens and facing the reality of the Romulus condition, held emergency meetings. Old rivals sat across from each other, forced by circumstance to find common ground. The process was anything but smooth. Arguments erupted, accusations were thrown, and the weight of compromise pressed down on everyone involved. As the talks dragged on, protests filled the streets of major cities. People carried signs that read, "Unity or Independence," and "Freedom before Unity." The voices were divided. In New York, demonstrators called for open minds and collaboration. In Moscow, crowds rallied against losing national sovereignty. The media reported on the split, fueling both hope and fear in equal measure. Back at the ship in Nevada, Thoreau watched the broadcasts. His kind had seen civilizations crumble from within due to a lack of cooperation. He knew that the challenge he posed was not simple, but it was necessary. The Romulus did not seek to rule, they sought to prevent humanity from destroying itself through division. On the third day, after hours of relentless debate, the first signs of progress emerged. Dr. Gray and the newly formed United Earth Council made a public announcement. The council, though temporary, would be a test to see if humanity could work together. Composed of representatives from every continent, its goal was to unify decision-making and ensure that all voices were heard. The announcement sparked mixed reactions. Some saw it as a breakthrough, a historic moment when humanity took its first steps toward real unity. Others remained skeptical, convinced that it was a compromise that would collapse under its own weight. But the council's formation was enough for the Romulus to take the next step. On the fourth day, Thoreau addressed the world once more. "We have seen your willingness to try, and for this, we will begin to share our knowledge. But remember, unity is not a one-time effort. It is a continuous process that must be nurtured." His gaze softened as he looked at Drive. "Gray, we will teach you how to harness clean energy more efficiently, heal your environment, and advance your technology. But with these gifts comes responsibility. Use them wisely." The world held its breath as the Romulus extended a hand, literally and figuratively. A small, transparent device emerged from Thoreau's palm and floated toward Drive. Gray. She reached out, her fingers brushing against its cool surface. It emitted a soft light before embedding itself into her communication tablet, which immediately displayed information far beyond current human understanding. Scientists around the world scrambled to decode the shared knowledge. It was more than they could have imagined. Blueprints for advanced solar technology, methods for purifying water and air, and medical breakthroughs that promised to eradicate diseases. The initial shock of these revelations was met with awe. People began to understand the magnitude of what had just been gifted to them. But even as the first steps toward change were taken, challenges loomed. Implementing the knowledge required cooperation on a scale never seen before. The United Earth Council faced immediate tests. Arguments erupted over who would oversee the new technologies and how to distribute resources. The echoes of old habits and rivalries persisted, threatening to undermine the fragile unity. In the following weeks, Thoreau and his companions remained present but silent, watching humanity wrestle with their newfound hope and the heavy conditions attached to it. The media shifted from sensational headlines to stories of collaboration. Reports of engineers from different countries working side by side on projects began to emerge. In some places, communities banded together, inspired by the possibility of a future free from pollution and scarcity. In others, skepticism remained, casting a shadow over the progress. Dr. Gray spent her days and nights consulting with experts, managing the flow of Romulus information, and advising the council. She knew that humanity had crossed a threshold, but they were far from stable ground. Every decision, every action now had the weight of the future behind it. And as the sun set on that pivotal week, Thales spoke privately to Dr. Gray one last time. You have taken the first step. The path ahead will be difficult, but remember that unity is not just an agreement, it is a practice, one that must be chosen daily. With that, the Romulus returned to their ship. The world watched as the doors sealed shut, but they did not depart. Their presence was a reminder that humanity's journey had only begun, and that the conditions set by the Romulus were more than guidelines, they were a mirror held up to humanity's true potential and greatest challenge. The initial days following the release of Romulus knowledge were filled with an overwhelming mix of optimism and chaos. The world's top scientists and engineers, gathered under the banner of the newly formed United Earth Council, worked day and night to comprehend the complexity of the information. Blueprints for energy sources that could power entire cities without pollution, detailed instructions on how to rejuvenate dying ecosystems, and medical advancements that bordered on miraculous were now in human hands. Yet, with every revelation, new questions emerged, casting shadows over the newfound hope. The biggest challenge was how to distribute the benefits of this advanced technology. The United Earth Council struggled to ensure fair access while facing relentless pressure from powerful nations and corporations that wanted to secure their stake in the future. Meetings grew tense as representatives from richer countries demanded priority, arguing that their established infrastructures made them the ideal launch points for implementing the Romulus technology. Representatives from developing regions pushed back, insisting that fairness meant starting where help was needed most. As weeks passed, the excitement began to fade, replaced by frustration and suspicion. A leaked memo from one of the Council's closed-door meetings only added fuel to the fire. It revealed that certain members were attempting to negotiate secret deals for exclusive access to Romulus technology. Outrage erupted worldwide, protests surged, with people chanting, "No monopolies on the future." And, for all or none. Dr. Eleanor Gray found herself at the heart of these debates. Once admired as the voice that connected humanity to the Romulus, she was now caught between competing interests. She spent countless nights pacing the halls of the Council's headquarters, trying to find solutions that would appease both sides. Every decision felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. Her once calm demeanor showed signs of strain, dark circles under her eyes, a voice that wavered when questioned. One evening, as the arguments reached a breaking point, the Council chambers were interrupted by a familiar resonance. The devices in the room hummed and flickered, and Thales' voice echoed in their minds. "You must learn that progress without unity is an illusion. You have been given tools, but only cooperation will allow you to wield them wisely." The message was clear. Thales and the Romulus were watching, not as passive observers but as silent judges of humanity's choices. The room fell silent, a heavy sense of shame settling over those who had let greed and mistrust dominate their actions. The moment was a reminder that this was more than politics or power, it was about survival and the future of an entire species. In response, the Council regrouped and agreed on a new strategy: transparency. They broadcasted their meetings to the public and invited scientists and thinkers from around the globe, regardless of status or nationality, to contribute ideas. This move, although met with initial skepticism, began to rebuild trust. Progress was slow, but projects began to take shape. Teams from rival countries collaborated on building the first pollution-free power plant in South America, an ambitious undertaking that showed the world what cooperation could achieve. Still, challenges persisted. In certain parts of the world, powerful entities opposed the changes. Corporations with deep ties to fossil fuels stirred public fears, spreading rumors that the Romulus technology was dangerous or that it would collapse economies and steal jobs. Propaganda videos depicted shadowy images of Romulus ships raining down destruction, igniting fear among those already hesitant to embrace the new era. Dr. Gray, now seen as both a leader and a target, faced threats. Protesters gathered outside her home, demanding she step down. Some believed she was too aligned with the Council and its push for unity, others accused her of colluding with the Romulus for power. In a televised interview, she addressed the accusations with steady determination. "The Romulus did not choose me to rule. They spoke to all of us through me. I'm just trying to help us listen." Despite the growing tension, pockets of hope shone through. In Africa, communities were building sustainable farms using Romulus techniques for soil revitalization, doubling their harvests in mere months. In India, Doctors successfully cured diseases once deemed untreatable, using medical advancements gifted by the Romulus. Stories like these served as reminders that the promise of a better world was not just a dream, it was happening. But the tipping point came when a sudden, massive storm struck the eastern seaboard of the United States. Despite warnings, the storm's intensity surpassed anything seen before, decimating coastal cities and leaving millions displaced. The devastation was a wake-up call. The message of unity became urgent, not just as a concept but as a necessity for survival. The world watched, expecting the Romulus to intervene, to offer immediate aid or guidance. But they remained silent, watching from their ship. It was in those desperate days that humanity showed its resilience. Volunteers from all over the world poured into the U.S. to help with recovery efforts. Countries that had been at odds sent supplies and personnel. Social media filled with images of people crossing borders, leaving behind differences to help those in need. The sight of shared struggle and solidarity was a turning point for many. Trust, hard-earned and fragile, began to take root. Thelaus finally emerged again, but this time without speaking. Instead, he raised his hand and projected a holographic image into the sky, visible to everyone on Earth. It showed a vision. A world where clean energy powered entire continents, forests regrew, and oceans teemed with life. But intertwined were scenes of human cooperation. Scientists, farmers, builders, and leaders, all working as one. The message needed no words. The future was possible, but only if humanity chose it. The display ended, leaving the world in a stunned silence. In that moment, the reality sank in. The Romulus were not going to save humanity, they had only shown the path. It was up to humans to walk it together. And so, amid the ruins left by the storm, seeds of change took root. The United Earth Council solidified its role as a truly global body, and people began to see that unity was more than an idea, it was a choice that had to be made every day. As Dr. Gray stood looking out at the first rebuilt neighborhood, she felt a glimmer of hope, fragile but real. Humanity was learning that progress was not just in the gifts they received but in how they came together to use them. Months turned into a year, and humanity stood at the cusp of a new era. The presence of the Romulus, once met with awe and suspicion, became a silent yet constant reminder of the promise they offered and the expectations they held. Their silver ship, now an icon, loomed in the Nevada desert, unchanged and unmoving, like a vigilant guardian waiting to see if Earth's inhabitants would earn the future they had glimpsed. The United Earth Council, which had started as a fractured collection of powerful voices, had evolved into a genuine representation of global cooperation. Through transparent leadership and relentless commitment, they built a system that included the voices of smaller nations, indigenous communities, and youth activists who had once been overlooked. Decisions were made not by power but by consensus, a shift that took months of heated debate, compromise, and, at times, sheer willpower to maintain. Dr. Eleanor Gray, who had reluctantly become the face of humanity's efforts, now worked tirelessly as a bridge between science and policy. The strain of her role showed in the lines etched on her face and the exhaustion in her eyes, but she remained resolute. The words of Thelaus echoed in her mind daily: unity is not just an agreement, it is a practice. The world had learned this lesson painfully, through storms and struggles, but they were beginning to internalize it. The implementation of Romulus technology had begun to bear fruit. Cities powered by clean energy emerged, their streets lit by solar grids that stretched for miles. Air quality improved as factories adopted environmentally friendly practices, and new, faster modes of transportation that required no fossil fuels began to replace older systems. Reports of once dead rivers flowing clear again and fish returning to polluted waters lifted the spirits of communities. The skepticism that had lingered was now overshadowed by tangible progress. It wasn't perfect, and the road was still rocky, but it was real. Despite this progress, the challenges were far from over. The threat of those clinging to old power structures loomed, fueled by a sense of loss and fear of irrelevance. In some corners of the world, underground movements formed, vowing to resist the global shift. They claimed that the push for unity threatened their way of life, that it was a betrayal of independence. A small but vocal contingent argued that humans had become puppets, their strings pulled by the Romulus. These movements, though small, reminded the Council that humanity's unity was fragile and that peace was not just the absence of war but the presence of trust. One evening, as the stars glittered above the desert, Thales once again appeared before the council. His sudden appearance brought a hush over the gathering. The leaders present leaned forward, hanging on every word. "You have done well to take the first steps toward unity," Thales said. His voice, still serene and commanding, carried an undertone of pride. "But know this, our knowledge is not infinite. What we have given you is enough to sustain and grow your civilization for centuries. The rest must come from within, from your own creativity and innovation. We will depart soon." The announcement sent a ripple of shock through the room. Depart. The Romulus, who had become a silent guide, were leaving. Dr. Gray felt her heart race. She stood, the question on her lips, shared by everyone present. "Thales, why now? We are only just beginning. What if we fail without your guidance?" Thales' expression softened, and for the first time, he seemed almost human. "It is time for you to trust yourselves. We came not to fix your world, but to remind you that you have the strength to do it. Unity, cooperation, and resilience, these are the greatest tools you possess. The rest is up to you." The room fell silent as the weight of his words settled over them. Humanity had been given the keys to a better future, but it was up to them to drive forward. There would be no more safety net, no silent watchers ready to intervene. The realization was both daunting and liberating. As the news spread, the world reacted with a mixture of fear and resolve. Public debates, think pieces, and roundtable discussions dominated the airwaves. Some argued that humanity was not ready, that the Romulus departure would lead to chaos. Others believed it was exactly what was needed, a push to stand on their own. The day of the Romulus departure arrived, marked by a sky painted in hues of gold and pink. Thousands gathered around the Nevada desert, with millions more watching through screens, holding their breath. Thales stood at the entrance of the ship, his gaze sweeping across the crowd one last time. "Remember," he said, his voice carried on the wind, "unity is your strength, not just in times of crisis, but in every choice you make. Our journey takes us beyond, but we will watch from afar, hoping that when we meet again, it will be as equals." With that, the Romulus turned and stepped inside. A low hum resonated through the air as the ship's silver surface glowed brighter, almost blinding. The vessel began to rise, slowly at first, then with a surge that made the earth tremble. It ascended into the sky, shrinking until it was just a glimmer, then nothing. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a roar of applause and cheers erupted from the crowd. Some cried, others held hands, feeling an overwhelming mixture of loss and hope. Dr. Gray stood among them, the wind pulling at her hair, eyes fixed on the place where the ship had vanished. A tear rolled down her cheek, not from sadness but from the realization that a new chapter had begun. The days that followed were filled with action. The council accelerated projects that had been on hold, inspired by the final words of Thales. Citizens stepped up, volunteering to clean up neighborhoods, plant trees, and help implement new technologies. The shadow of doubt still lingered, but it was met by a growing belief that humanity could indeed chart its own course. Years passed, and the world changed. Borders began to mean less as collaboration took root. Schools taught the story of the Romulus, not as saviors but as reminders of what humanity was capable of. Children grew up knowing that their potential was limitless if they chose unity over division. Dr. Gray, now older and serving as an advisor rather than a leader, would often look at the stars at night. The sky seemed different now, not as a vast unknown, but as a map of future journeys yet to come. The Romulus had been right. The power to build, to dream, to create, had always been within them. And as humanity moved forward, they carried with them the memory of the visitors who had come not to conquer, but to awaken the strength that had always been there, waiting. The Romulus were gone, but their legacy was woven into the fabric of Earth, guiding humanity not with a hand but with the reminder that true progress came from within.